welcome to episode 2 of Movie Talks. My name is Daniel.
And I'm Jared.
And in honor of the release of Christopher Nolan's newest film, Dunkirk, we'll be taking a look back on the director's previous filmography before jumping into a review of his newest film.
Dunkirk. I don't know about you, but I have so many thoughts racing through my head right now.
I know. This is an interesting one. I think this I'm speaking for both of us here. We've never felt more of a need to talk about a movie than with Dunkirk.
Definitely. And it's weird. I feel the need to talk about a lot of things, but I don't feel like I know how to put them into words.
I know. It's really difficult. A lot of the stuff that I have to say is surrounding mainly just my overall impressions about the director, Christopher Nolan.
Christopher Nolan has had an interesting career. He's been able to create some very original things, but then he's also tackled some pre-existing franchises very well, I think.
Yeah, that's right. So I think before we jump into a review of Dunkirk, we're going to go into what our overall impressions are about Christopher Nolan, so we can more easily set up our thoughts on Dunkirk.
I think that's a good plan.
Okay. So in order to set up my overall opinion of him, I do have to talk about something surrounding the release of Dunkirk, but then we'll circle back to his other films. Okay. So the early complaints that I was hearing about Dunkirk was about its characterization issues, which that's something that I've always had an issue with in Christopher Nolan's films. But this is really the first time I think it's ever been widely addressed. So, now the reason I think his characterization has always been weak is because it's never really been the focus. His films are all about the spectacle, I think. They're really theatrical experiences, and that's why I think you should see all of his movies in the theaters, but I don't think they hold up after their theatrical runs.
That's one thing that I have written down. With Christopher Nolan's films, I really only want to watch them one time. Yeah. Aside from the Batman films, which they're comic book movies, so of course you want to rewatch them, but some of his movies are they're exhausting to watch. The scale of the films and the stakes, they're not necessarily huge, but there's just so much to get through, and I feel like he requires so much from the viewer that it's just exhausting to go through, and at the end you're like, I don't want to ever do that again.
Yeah,
I like the movie, but it was such an experience, and it's just, I feel like sometimes he can get a bit carried away.
Mm-hmm. So one thing I also think is, ever since Batman Begins, his career took a big turn. I think his first movies, I don't know if you've seen them, but particularly Following and Insomnia are very much character and story-driven movies. But ever since Batman Begins, the extent of Nolan's characterization has either been something bad happens to a guy's wife, i.e. Memento, The Prestige, and Inception, or a guy is trying to get back to his children, which you'll see in Inception and Interstellar.
And almost kind of The Dark Knight Rises, too, where he's trying to get back to Gotham, which is, essence, his family.
That's right, yeah. So, yeah, like I said, he seemed to have a pretty good grasp on his characterization in his earlier films, but ever since he started getting involved with studios, I think it's really negatively impacted his career. Now, yeah, now that's something that a lot of people might disagree with, but I would like to explain myself a little bit before I make such a big claim like that. So, like I said, Insomnia and Following are really the exceptions to those characterization things, and I need to clarify, the Dark Knight characters and the Dark Knight trilogy aren't his characters, so it's not like you could use that as kind of a something to wiggle out of that
stereotype. I agree with you 100%. The Batman characters have existed for a long time. That's a very successful franchise that a lot of people have grown up with and love, and the people are attached to those characters, and they come in already knowing, okay, this is Bruce Wayne, this is what he's been through, this is the Joker, this is how those two work together. So Nolan doesn't necessarily have to create a new character. He just has to give the people what they want. And in that way, his characterization issue kind of disappears because the people themselves have already characterized his characters.
That's right. They have motivations, they have backstories all set up, so he doesn't need to worry about doing any of that himself. All he needs to focus on is the spectacle, like I said.
His stunts are very good.
Yeah, his stunts are very good. And that's why, that's why The Dark Knight is considered his best movie by a lot of people, because he did not create the characters himself. So there's no weak character in those movies because he didn't create them.
That's another thing. Usually in his movies, the characters are kind of flat, I think, but the performances by the actors and actresses, I think they elevate the movie higher than it possibly should be. Heath Ledger's Joker is a perfect example. He gives one of the best performances I've ever seen. And I think if you ask people, why do you like The Dark Knight so much, they say Heath Ledger's Joker, and I think that's why it's in the conversation for best movie of all time, when I think it doesn't necessarily deserve to be.
Okay, yeah. So, I don't want to come off as if I hate Christopher Nolan. The only reason I feel the need to talk about this is because, like you said, many refer to him as the greatest filmmaker of all time, which,
he's not.
In my humble opinion, he definitely is not. You can't put him in the same league as people like Kubrick, who was an auteur of okay, so people say Christopher Nolan's movies are really big in scale, but there's just nothing really underneath the surface.
Exactly. His plots are very on the surface. There's not much going on underneath. They're kind of weak.
They are. I mean, I wish people would analyze his movies more instead of just being like, oh, Inception, look at the buildings flying upside down. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. He has a lot of plot holes if you stop and think about it.
Yeah.
But again, I like Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
I like his movies. I just think that he's getting a little bit more than what he's earned.
Yeah, it's really an unfortunate thing, because with the amount of people claiming that he's the best director ever, the thing is, many, including me, including you probably too, we've just developed this negative opinion of him, like inherently. It's not he's a bad director. He's actually really good. He's just not as good as I think people make him out to be.
Yes, and I think he's hurt by those reviews of him too, because I watched trailers for Dunkirk and they're saying, oh, this is hands down the best motion picture of the year. Mm-hmm. And then I'm sitting in the theater and it's halfway through the movie and I'm starting to think, okay, this is good. It's great to look at, but what about this? What about that? And I think it hurts the moviegoer because they're starting to think, well, isn't he supposed to be the best? Why is this not meeting my expectations? And that's one
expectations.
That's one of the things about Dunkirk. I liked it, but in some ways, it met my expectations of being below what I thought people had been saying about it.
Yeah, that's the big problem. Now, you just gotta believe me. I look forward to Christopher Nolan movies. Every single one, I look forward to them. Just not in the kind of same way I look forward to, say, a Tarantino movie. And the reason that is because with Nolan, I know I'm going to get a tremendous theatrical experience, but not necessarily a movie that will live on for decades after its release. Yeah, like you said, I just can't help but be disappointed when I rewatch his movies. They just don't hold up after that. I'll say glorious theatrical experience. It's great to see his movies in theaters.
Oh, definitely. The screen and the sound editing is very good.
Amazing. It'll get nominated for sure.
But one thing that I've written down is that his movies leave a weird taste in the mouth.
Yeah.
I remember coming out of The Dark Knight Rises on opening night, and I could not sleep the entire night. And I liked the movie, but something about it just didn't sit right with me. I felt like there was something unanswered, and it was driving me crazy all night, and I couldn't sleep. And I felt the same way about Dunkirk last night. I was sick to my stomach, and I just couldn't figure out why, because I had all these thoughts running through my head about why I didn't like the movie, but yet deep down, I knew that I did. And I was struggling to put into words why I liked the movie.
Yeah, that's true. And now I think we'll start to jump into our actual review of Dunkirk at this point.
All right.
Now that we've got some basis on our overall thinkings and impressions on Christopher Nolan's past films.
So Dunkirk, it was quite an experience.
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't know, Dunkirk follows the British and French troops at Dunkirk who are surrounded by the Germans and are trying to be evacuated from the beaches before they're just all either captured or killed, because there are German planes circling, dropping bombs, and the German army is actually closing in on the beach.
Yeah.
And so you'd think that the stakes would feel very high, but for me they didn't. And I think I know why. We as the viewer are supposed to feel like the Germans are closing in on us. We see the flyers come down that say "We surround you," right. And I thought those were very effective.
Yeah.
But overall, there was we never once see the actual enemy. We just see a plane, and half the time you can't even tell which plane is a British plane and which plane is a German plane. And so I think not having a face to put with the villain lowers the stakes, because we haven't seen them, so I don't feel like they're right behind me. I don't feel like they're about to overtake me and kill me.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting point. See, I actually liked the aspect of how you never see the villain. I thought it was different. You know, we've never really seen that in a war movie before. Just solely focusing on one side of the battle. That's really what it is. And I think part of that not caring about what's happening, or not caring, but just not kind of feeling it like you wish you would.
Not feeling the suspense of
right.
People on the beach.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the characterization issues. But I would like to explain how I feel his pattern of weak characterization may have actually worked in Dunkirk's favor.
Okay.
So this movie is massive. The scale of this movie is far too big to be focusing on the characterization of a few and the backstories. The situation the soldiers find themselves facing, I think, is enough to make us feel their plight. Characterization, backstories would simply be unnecessary, and I think it would only convolute the story, because the story is told in a very interesting way. I don't think we might get into some spoilers in a little bit, but as for right now,
we definitely will.
Okay, yeah, we definitely will. But as of right now, I'm not gonna go into how the story is structured, because I think that's one of the coolest aspects of the movie.
Kind of like you said, it portrays a war setting in a interesting way. One thing that I was listening to a podcast this morning, and I heard them say that this movie is like watching Saving Private Ryan from the perspective of Private Ryan.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I thought that was very interesting, because the Battle of Dunkirk is already over. The Germans have won, and the British are now trying to retreat. Just like in Saving Private Ryan, the American forces have been defeated. They're just trying to hold off the bridge until they can get rescued.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not necessarily watching a typical war movie where we follow a platoon and we get to learn about all the characters, and then there's a battle, some of them die, and then they finally have the big battle that results in the ultimate conclusion of the film. We don't get that in Dunkirk.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't even notice that, but there's no really big battle. The movie is a big battle, but there's nothing towards the end that makes it more epic than it had been before. And I think I kind of like that too. I actually really liked the ending. Again, we won't go into spoilers yet, but I liked how small it was. I think that's one way you could describe it.
I think that worked towards the movie's advantage, because it wasn't focused around an actual battle. It was just focused around the aftermath of one battle, and it involved not an army, but rather the citizens of Britain.
And individuals too, soldiers. So there's another fear that has been going around about this movie, which is very abnormal for a Christopher Nolan movie. In fact, this seems to be one of his more critiqued about movies so far. You don't usually see critiques about his movies before they even come out, but this time there were fears about the short running time. And I will defend it in saying that the movie is just way too epic to complain about it.
I loved the shorter runtime.
Yeah.
I think if it had been 2.5 hours, I might have fallen asleep.
Right. I think for the most part, it's very well utilized. Every single minute, there's something going on. And I think, like you said, it just would have felt overlong if anything else had been added. I think it did feel a little bit repetitive at points, partly because of its structure and how it goes back and forth to other situations.
We'll get into that with spoilers.
Okay, yeah.
A little bit more.
But the sheer scope of the movie that you can really see in every frame, especially with those IMAX cameras that they were using, was more than enough to keep me compelled to the very end of it.
All right. Are you ready to get into some spoilers?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, so let's see. This movie tries to balance 3 separate stories and ultimately bring them all together in the end. We have one setting, which is the mole. And at first, we thought that the mole was the word for like a spy.
Yeah.
But I actually learned that a mole is a embankment on a beach that holds back the enemy. So that makes much more sense now. So we have the mole. 2, we have the sea. And 1, we have the air. So, for the sake of clarity, we're just going to call the mole the beach from now on. So on the beach, we follow Finn Whitehead, who is... He hasn't really done much before.
See, I didn't even... Oh, wait, is that the actor's name?
Yes.
Okay.
So, he is in most ways the protagonist of this film, I think. He's on the beach. He's one of the soldiers that's waiting to be evacuated. And one of the most confusing things about this movie, and I'm going to say this now, if you don't pay attention, this movie will confuse you and you will be lost the entire time.
Yeah, that's something real quick before I get into it. I think it's kind of unnecessary how confusing this movie was.
Definitely.
It's just a war movie.
Trying to balance 3 different stories at one time that are all on different timelines is, I think, a bit too much to ask from a viewer who just wants to see a war movie.
Right. Well, I mean, this is a Christopher Nolan. I think most people know they're gonna, no matter what they get, it's gonna be a little bit confusing.
Well, okay. When I heard that Christopher Nolan was directing this movie, I was thinking, okay, we're gonna get wide shots, we're gonna get grayscale, we're gonna get some good action. I wasn't thinking, oh wait, we're gonna have to try to piece all this together ourselves.
That's right.
But that's one thing that Christopher Nolan does. He throws you into it right at the beginning and expects you to catch up.
Yeah.
And it works in other movies, but in this one, I think it doesn't. I think that the risk is far too high that people get confused because on the beach, it's okay. Can we talk about the time stamps at the beginning?
Yes, we can. Yeah, we're in spoilers now.
Okay. So for the beach, underneath it says 1 week. For the sea, it says 1 day, and for the air, it says 1 hour. And that is all we get. There is no explanation as to what that means whatsoever, and he just expects you to get that all on your own, which is not impossible, but there are multiple ways to go about it, and I think that the way that you approach that will ultimately influence your overall impressions of the movie, and I think that leaving that up to chance is a bit too
it's risky
with a true story movie.
Yeah,
it's not like Inception where you're like, oh, is he in a dream? Is he not in a dream? At the end, it's hard. Okay, here's what I think about those times. I think that that's how long they have been at those locations.
Yeah, that's okay. I thought it was. I took it as that's how long we're gonna spend with these groups. Like the time frame with the people on the beach was a week long, and then the time frame of the people of Tom Hardy in the plane was an hour, and then the boat was a day. Okay, that kind of. But I'm gonna have to see it again to confirm. I agree with you there. I think you just said it a little differently than I did. For the first half of the movie, we are for the majority with Finn Whitehead and Harry Styles and that other kid's name that I don't know who doesn't speak any English on the beach for 1 week because you see shifts from night to day, and then on in the sea with Mark Rylance, you don't see that. It's just 1 day, and then in the air with Tom Hardy and I don't know the other pilot's name. Yeah. But you hear them talk about their fuel levels and such, and so you realize that okay, they've only been up there for so long, and so the 3 stories try
to come together at the end, and it's kind of difficult because you see multiple time frames of each story in a different order, and so you see one plane get shot down, but nothing happens, and then 30 minutes later into the movie, when you're with another, when you're with the sea, you see the same plane go down, and you're like, well, wait a minute, that happened 30 minutes ago. Why is it happening now? And if you don't recognize at the beginning of the film what those timestamps are, you're
gonna be lost.
Yes, you're gonna be completely confused.
Yeah. So I had that issue at first too, but then I did a little bit of thinking, and I do think it pays off for the film in the end, because I was trying to think of a more interesting way to tell the story. If you are trying to tell 3 different stories where one is significantly longer than the other, you can't really do it. Or else, if you try to do it like a linear timeline, those plane fights would only take up about 10 minutes of the movie.
Yes. Which I think that the third setting air, that was my favorite.
Yeah, the aerial dogfights were really intense. Those are probably my favorite parts of the movie too. And I would say the boat with Mark Rylance and those 2 kids, I think was the weakest.
It was unnecessary.
I think that part could have been significantly shortened, because for a long time I thought it was completely unneeded. And we are in spoilers, so when the ships show up at the end, I thought that was a beautiful moment, but it was a long build up to get to that point, I thought, and
it ultimately, you couldn't really celebrate because there are 400,000 men on the beach, and it can only take maybe 1,000 at a time.
It is a true story, though, so those are aspects you cannot really complain about.
I know. One thing that you said that it was a unique way to show this story by tackling 3 different timelines and trying to sync them all up. I think that showing this story from not the battle perspective, but from the evacuation perspective is unique enough. I think
that's right. Yeah.
I think that it could have been more effective if it was just one story and we just follow it all the way through.
So you're saying just maybe have the beach parts, and then maybe when a plane flies by, go to them for a little bit.
You can have all 3 of the settings, but don't put them on different timelines. I'm saying you start here and you go all the way through and you end here.
I could definitely agree with that. I think back to that boats part, I think it would have been almost more impactful if we just kind of see the boats coming out of nowhere. Instead, we've been following them this whole way, and we know either way we would know that they get there. But I think if you've been with the soldiers, maybe spend the time you've been spending with Mark Rylance on those boats, maybe spend that time getting some characterization during the nighttime when there's not as much battle going on. I think you have a more impactful story at the end of the day.
Definitely. I think ultimately I didn't care about any of these characters. And really, I did care about Tom Hardy's character, but really that's just because I like Tom Hardy. And I think Finn Whitehead is the protagonist of the story, but Tom Hardy is the hero of the movie, I think. So obviously, I cared about him, and when his plane, when he runs out of gas and starts to go down, I get scared. I'm thinking, okay, is he going to eject? Is he going to crash? Is he going to land the plane successfully? That's about the only time where I was genuinely concerned. Yes, and when his fellow pilot, when his boat crashes into the ocean and he's trying to escape, those 2 were instances where the only time that I really cared what happened to the characters. And I think that's partially because a lot of this, the action of this movie was spoiled by the marketing, I think.
Yeah, both of us were not really surprised by anything that happened in the movie. I mean, there's a few things, like the kid on the boat, him falling down the stairs, that wasn't spoiled in any of the trailers, but the vast majority of the action, we knew what was going to happen. We'd seen planes go down in the water. When they're hiding out in that boat, we saw the guy get shot.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a lot of stuff that we'd already seen, so there's no surprise, there's no suspense.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah, we knew everything that was coming. So you, at the same time, when you want to feel suspense, in the back of your head, okay, this is gonna happen. He's probably gonna survive this. No one else is.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how it happens with a protagonist, unfortunately, in most movies. Another thing is that the marketing built, I think, a lot on the suspense and the fear of, okay, the soldiers are surrounded. They are being closed in on constantly. But again, I didn't feel that because I never saw the enemy. I never felt that pressure behind me that they're closing in. They're closing in. The only time we feel that is in Christopher Nolan's his trademark opening scene.
His opening scene.
That jumps in with action. But then again, it's only 2 minutes of action, and that's the only hand-to-hand, not even hand-to-hand. It's the only real ground combat that we see.
Yeah, I back to the opening. I thought it was really well done, actually.
Oh no, I liked it.
Oh no, yeah,
I just thought it was missing a bit more action.
But the first gunshot of the movie, it kind of like made me jolt.
Oh yeah.
Out of my seat, and I was like, oh my gosh, okay. Because the sound design in this movie, it will get nominated for an Oscar. It might win. It's some of the best sound effects, gunfire, war sound effects I've heard in a movie.
The bombs dropping are you do feel like they're gonna hit you.
Yeah, that's right. Any more thoughts?
Let's see. Oh, one thing that I had. So, with trying to balance the 3 different timelines, I feel you lose some of the emotion in the other ones. So there's one scene where Finn Whitehead, Harry Styles, their little group is in a beached boat waiting for the tide to come in so they can hopefully sail it off of the beach. And they come under enemy fire, but then again, we don't see the enemy, so you feel suspense, but at the same time, not really. And that's one of the most tense moments of the entire movie. And they cut right from that, without any resolution, to the boats coming up to Dunkirk.
Yeah.
And you see all the soldiers cheering, and Tom Hardy swoops in and takes down a plane.
That's my favorite part of the movie.
And that's a great part.
Mm.
But ultimately, I couldn't feel the same triumph that the soldiers were feeling, because in the back of my head, I'm not even in the back of my head. In the front of my head, I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. You just showed me this. Cut back to that. I want to see what happened to them. Because once they're safe, I'll be more at ease, and then I can cut over to the moment of triumph and fully celebrate. And
I mean, that could be deliberate. It could be, well, there's sometimes small victories in the battle, but there's something still happening behind the scenes that not everyone.
I definitely think that Christopher Nolan should get the benefit of the doubt in a lot of this.
Yeah.
But for me, this is just stuff that I probably would have changed just because it's me. I can't get too excited about one thing because I'm worried about another thing. And that might be what he's going for. He could very well be trying to make... And it's not necessarily that I was invested in those characters in the boat and I cared what happened to them so much that I wanted to cut back to it. It was just... I was kind of annoyed because we had spent so much time with them at the beginning. I hadn't really learned anything about them. I didn't really care. And now something interesting is finally happening to them, and I don't get to watch it.
Yeah. I know it might sound like we're dogging on this movie. We don't like talking badly about movies.
No, not at all.
This is a good movie. This is a very good movie. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything else to say.
It's just frustrating.
It is. It's a little frustrating.
Because this movie has the potential to be one of the best war movies of all time, but I don't think it is. The story, I think, is very interesting. I knew nothing about this movie going in.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like the characters were not built up. Okay, here's one thing. I think that not building up the characters... the soldiers, not Mark Rylance, not Tom Hardy. The soldiers on the beach. I think that works because in a war setting, you don't have time to get to know everyone.
That's true. That's why I said, I'm willing to give Nolan a pass on that characterization issue for this film, just because it's far too massive to be spending all of its precious minutes on just a few soldiers.
Yes, and if you get attached to them, they're bound to get killed off.
Mm-hmm.
And since so many of them are going to die, it's not worth going through the trouble of introducing you to 100 new characters.
That's right. And just lastly, as I said, the whole Mark Rylance boat thing, that cutting that out of the film would have been a great opportunity to get us more attached to some of the characters on the beach, because that was the more interesting part of the film anyway. But you get what you get.
I agree. I think that Tom Hardy's character was the most interesting, even though he barely speaks, which I thought was interesting.
And you can't hear what he wants.
Oh my goodness, I was about to say that, and I'm glad you brought it up. Thank goodness that there's hardly any dialogue in this movie, because you cannot understand any of it. It's not that the accents are so thick, which they are, but there's just so much going on. There's so much background noise, and they're talking.
The music is loud.
Yeah,
and
it is impossible. I needed subtitles. I could not hear a single thing. I was trying to piece it together based on facial expressions and reactions, and it was just, again, it kind of took me out of the story. Whenever Tom Hardy's flying and he has on his mask and he's trying to speak, I want to know what he has to say, because he's the character that I'm most interested in, and honestly, he's kind of in the most peril because he's in the air with a bunch of other planes, and if he crashes, where's he going to go?
Yeah. I think that's a valid point, even though it's the dialogue of the people in the planes, it's not going to be story progressing dialogue. It's just kind of, technical, strategy talking with the other planes. But that is a fair negative to list, because it is very distracting, because you don't know if you're supposed to be here knowing what he's saying or not supposed to be hearing. So
that's another thing. A lot of the suspense surrounding the air setting is that they're running out of fuel. But they need to protect the people on the beach from the incoming airstrikes. And you can't hear how much fuel they have or what the status of their gauge is. But they do write down some things.
That was helpful.
Yes. No. Without that, I would have been totally lost. But I still think that if we're getting a few more updates about the status of the plane, I think that would have been better. Let's see. Okay, how do you is it Cillian Murphy or Cillian Murphy?
I think I saw someone say, or heard someone say Killian.
I think it is Killian.
Yeah.
But was he even in this movie?
Yeah, his character. This is another thing with the boats. He is, I think, the most despicable character in the movie, and his character. He's pretty traumatized by what he's been seeing, what's been going around, but still, I think his character was unnecessary.
Yep, and it's unfortunate because I love Cillian Murphy. I think he's a great actor.
He's a great actor.
And when I saw him in the trailer yelling at Mark Rylance, "You should be at home,"
You thought there was going to be something more there.
Yes, I thought there was going to be higher stakes surrounding him. They just pluck him off a sinking ship, throw him on the boat, and he's just a grouchy old sailor who's just been shell shocked, and he doesn't say anything, and I feel like he was kind of wasted. Yeah,
you can tell that's the character that Christopher Nolan was thinking. Okay, maybe we can show the audience how this war is affecting people through this character, but there's definitely a much better way to do it than just have him sitting in the corner and not really doing anything.
There are some things of the movie that I think are very good, but before that, I do want to address one more issue that I have, and that is the character of George on Mark Rylance's show.
Yeah.
Yes. So, spoilers, once again, Cillian Murphy, in a moment of frustration, pushes George down the stairs into the hull of the ship, and he hits his head on, I assume, a pipe. There was a pipe next to him. And he loses his sight. He goes blind, he's bleeding, and eventually he does die. And that's about it. I didn't really care that he was on the ship. I thought it was kind of annoying because he just jumps on at the last second. He says, "I'll be useful, sir." Doesn't do a single thing.
Yeah.
And then just dies. And then at the end of the movie, they put him in the newspaper. It says 17-year-old hero at Dunkirk, and he didn't do a thing.
Yeah, there are bigger things going on.
Yes.
You know,
Mark Rylance is a hero. He, I mean,
there's lots of nitpick stuff you can do.
Yes,
with this movie.
as feudal as I think the sea setting was, Mark Rylance I think did a good job. I think he gave a very good performance. I just think that the people surrounding him and the setting of his timeline, I just think it was very expendable.
And weak, yeah.
Yes.
So those are our thoughts on Dunkirk.
I do. Let's give some uplifting encouragement. Let's say I have one thing that I want to say about this movie. Okay, let's see. How do I want to phrase this? Sometimes there isn't always shame in defeat, and I think that's something that this movie states very well. There is, if you survive, you are victorious. If we're able to complete this evacuation, it's a success, even though we just got destroyed by the Germans. And I think that this comes into fruition at the end of the movie when the soldiers get off the beach, they're getting onto the train, and the blind man is passing out blankets.
Yeah.
And Harry Styles, the man's passing out blankets, and he says, "Good job, boys. Good job, boys." And Harry Styles is ashamed because he feels that they've let down Britain. And he turns to Finn Whitehead and says, "Did you see that? He can't even look us in the eyes." And then Finn Whitehead goes up and gets his blanket, and you see the man put his hand on his face, and at that moment you realize that he's blind.
Yeah.
And it just shows that not necessarily coming out on top, it doesn't mean that you have lost the respect of everyone around you.
Yeah.
The British citizens were still they encouraged the soldiers on the train. They hand them drinks and stuff, and they're cheering them on. And it just shows that there can still be victory in defeat, and that the human spirit isn't necessarily that easy to crush.
Yeah,
I think that's important.
It's a good message. I think one of the taglines in the trailer was "Survival is victory," and that's really what this movie is about. It's about survival, and it's a really good depiction of it. You know, with all the nitpicks we've mentioned, this is a solid movie. It's one of the best war movies of this decade. Maybe even the best. I mean, I can't think of one that could compete. Lone Survivor, I suppose.
I love Lone Survivor.
You love Lone Survivor, yeah.
But yeah, it's a good movie. For all that we have said about it, we both did enjoy the movie. I think I will watch it again, just in an effort to understand the timelines a little bit more. But I just think the characters could have used a bit more, and the story itself could have been a little more central and focused.
Okay. Yeah, you guys should definitely go see this in theaters. That's where it's gonna be best. So I guess we'll get to grades now.
All right. So out of 5 stars, what would you give this movie, Daniel?
I give it 4 out of 5 stars. You know, there's nitpicks, of course.
Yes.
But this is a really solid movie. I will unfortunately say, you know, that score will only go down
with more viewings.
With time,
yes.
With time and with more viewings. It is a theatrical experience, and it will never be as good as it is in theaters, I don't think. And that's the fatal flaw of Christopher Nolan's movies, I think.
I agree. I do want to say that I think Harry Styles has a pretty good career ahead of him. I thought he did a good job.
He did a good job, yes.
So, with that said, I'm going to give this movie, out of 5 stars, I'm going to give it a 3.
A 3?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to like it more than I think I do.
Yeah, I get that.
It's not a bad movie. If it was a bad movie, I would have given it below a 3.
Yeah. But it's not a bad score.
No, yeah. Again, there are just so many things that I feel about this movie that I just can't. I can't put them into words. It's kind of weird how hard it is to talk about this movie. Yeah, this movie messed with me.
it just shows how much you can not like about a movie, but still end up liking it at the end of the day. But also, you just can't ignore what you've seen as faults in the movie that you would like to have fixed.
Yeah, that's one thing. This is based on a true story, and I admire the story completely. It's just whenever you have a true story and you try to put it into a movie, some stuff will be left out, and movies aren't perfect, but sometimes the stories are. And I think that this is a case where the story is phenomenal, and the movie kind of distorts the story just a bit to where you don't enjoy it as much as you should.
Fair, very fair point there.
All right, I think that's about all that my brain can take on Dunkirk.
So yeah, I mean, this is a 3.5 star average, so definitely go see it in theaters.
Definitely.
Maybe you'll like it more, maybe you'll like it less. But it is a hard movie not to like, I think.
Yes, it's an emotional journey. I would say, just with expectations, sitting in the theater, and then after, just thinking about it and thinking about war and how people sacrifice themselves for a cause so selflessly. It's just it's somber, but it's uplifting, and it's confusing, and it's just
there's a lot of things going on in this movie.
It's Christopher Nolan.
It's Christopher Nolan. That's the best way to sum it up right there.
All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up for episode 2 of Movie Talks. Once again, I'm Jared.
I'm Daniel.
And thanks for listening. We will see you next time.